Hi. So today we're going to be interviewing Gabriella. She's a clinical research coordinator at St. Michael's Hospital with the research group Pinnacle. And today we're going to learn a little bit about her experiences. It's really great to
Awesome.
have you here, Gabriella. How are you
Thank you
today?
for having me here, Nishat. I'm so excited to be part of this. Thank you for asking me to be part of this.
So the first question I have for you is about your educational background. So could you tell us a little bit about your majors, what you've studied?
I am somebody that was born and raised in Hamilton, and I actually started off with my undergraduate degree at McMaster University. I originally went into the life sciences program because I didn't really know what I wanted to study and really what career path to take. So I thought it was a nice, broad, general introduction into that. And what ended up happening over my first year is finding out what courses I actually really enjoyed. So I really liked the biology courses, and I ended up taking some psychology electives by chance and found that I really enjoyed them. And really, that kind of experience led me into pursuing a double major. So I ended up graduating with majors in biology and psychology, which to me I thought were wonderful blending of like those two subjects that are so closely intertwined. And then from that point, after I finished my undergrad, I still didn't really know what to do, but I was able to get some exposure to research through a few different lab courses and even just from doing my undergraduate thesis. And from those experiences, I really realized that research was something that I wanted to be part of and continue and pursue further. So from that point, I then ended up entering into a graduate program. So I ended up going into the neuroscience program, still at McMaster. And then from there, I was able to get my PhD. So that's a little bit about my educational background.
As one of the first time. So could you talk a little bit more about like different kind of research you were exposed to, like maybe your different majors and what did you do to get more involved in your undergrad?
Was trying to think back because it feels like so long ago, but my first kind of exposure into research was during my third year. I had to take a lab course, and at that time, I ended up taking a cognitive neuroscience lab study. And from that, we were really thrown into a lot in regards to the research field. So we had to participate ourselves in various research studies. And what was really neat was we were able to actually conduct, as part of a group, our own research project. And that was very challenging, but kind of in the best way because we had to really go through the literature, generate a research idea, propose methods for testing a hypothesis. And then on top of that, being able to actually conduct a study. And all of that was really rewarding, as difficult as it was and as new as it was. I really enjoyed the process. The study itself, obviously, was probably not the greatest in the sense that we had a very small sample size. There were so many limitations. I can remember writing about all of that afterwards, but I just remember that whole process being really fun, being able to design it and see it through, like, actually enrolling participants, writing up the results afterwards. All of that was a really positive experience. So from that point, I decided going into my fourth year that I wanted to take another lab study course. And it was also a requirement to have like a thesis project too. So I was working on like two different projects in that last final year, and they were both very different. One was clinical research related, whereas the other one was doing an animal research study. So I was working with mice, which I thought was actually a really great experience because I realized that that was not really my jam. I very much preferred working with humans and having participants in that way, but it was still very, again, rewarding experience. Um, and then from that point, I had a better idea of what I wanted to do moving forwards, after undergrad and, being able to continue with that and work with larger projects.
This question is just a little bit about your higher level education. So what decisions led you to pursue your graduate degree and your PhD?
I think everybody goes into graduate studies for different reasons, whether that be an end goal or just kind of wanting to continue with their education. And I was still in that boat of not really knowing what I wanted to do, but I did know that this was something that I wanted to pursue further, get more experience with in regards to research. And actually, I was kind of at a point in my career, you can say, that I didn't know if I wanted to pursue more psychology, like clinical psychology, or focus more on neuroscience and continuing with research in that field. So I ended up applying to a bunch of different programs, even though I was kind of hoping to more go into clinical psychology and potentially be like a psychologist. I didn't get into any of those programs. So I was thankful though that I did get into the neuroscience program at McMaster. And what was actually wonderful about this program is that it was entirely research based, meaning there's only one mandatory course, maybe two. And then honestly, all of the time that we had in this course was really focused on research and all of the different aspects of that. So it ended up being perfect in the sense that I was able to get all of that experience and build all these skills that I could then apply into my current position, which is as a clinical research coordinator. But I think again, what kind of led me into going through and getting the PhD was that I just knew I wanted more experience. And even with the idea that I may potentially want to be, a professor and teach at that level, I kind of knew I needed to continue my education that way. So those are the thought processes and reasons why I wanted to pursue the PhD.
What are some struggles that you faced when applying? Maybe at least if it was for your decision-making process or the actual application process, and any challenges you faced during the PhD itself.
It's funny because whenever somebody says, "What kind of challenges did you have in your PhD?" I'm always thinking, "Well, how much time do you have?" Because there is just so much that goes on. And I feel like a lot of people can relate that it is not a smooth process. It's very much a bumpy ride. But while I am joking, I will say that there were quite a few challenges that had to be overcome and encountered throughout the whole graduate studies PhD journey. So thinking about actually applying for the PhD, as I mentioned, it wasn't easy. I applied to a bunch of different programs, wasn't really able to get into some of the ones I had hoped for, but I did manage to get into the one program that I ended up pursuing. And I think part of that is just because of how competitive it is, right? A lot of these programs are only taking on a handful of students. So you really have to stand out in your application. And not only that, but being able to make connections and network ahead of time is so important and so valuable. So for myself, I actually ended up taking a year off after I completed my 4-year undergraduate degree. And then I ended up using that time to continue by volunteering in research labs, and really just gaining as much experience as I can. And through that process, I was kind of able to make those connections, as I was saying, with networking. And all of that really led me to finding who my future supervisor was going to be. But even that alone, it wasn't easy or straightforward because when I had first applied, I had worked with one specific supervisor who had essentially said that they would be happy to like take me on as their student. And then as I'm in the process of my submission into the program and even through like the just before getting interviewed and doing all of that, I found out that he had taken on another student, which was disappointing, obviously, because he said he wouldn't be able to take on another one. So I kind of felt like I had no other backup option, which looking back, obviously, definitely good idea to make connections and look at things for multiple different supervisors if possible. But I will say it still helped because this specific supervisor that did not take me had actually recommended me to somebody else who was looking for a student. And that was how I was able to end up meeting my supervisor. And that worked out really well afterwards. So again, very kind of bumpy initial beginning. And then once actually in the PhD program, and I should mention, I first started off as a master's student and then from there transferred into PhD. Something that, again, I think anyone who has gone through graduate studies would say is that you really need to have a lot of patience, a lot of determination, and kind of endurance as well to be able to go through and complete it because there are a lot of times where things really won't go the way that you're expecting. Things just take a lot longer than expected. And you really need to be able to push yourself through those challenges. And of course, you do have, your supervisor and other mentors involved, but you really need to be passionate about your project. Because if you can't connect with the importance of it, you won't be as motivated to succeed and to finish. So that was
Mhm.
something that I definitely learned through that process. And that was something that kept me going. Additionally, with having a good support system was also really important. So friends, family, your peers, you're all kind of in it together. And that was the mentality that really helped to get through any other hurdles. On top of that, I did have to deal with COVID. So the pandemic during my final year of PhD, but I was very lucky in the sense that I had all of my data collected by that point, and I was really just focusing on writing, which I was able to really do at that point with, all of the social isolation procedures in place. So I really spent that first initial part of the year writing and publishing papers. So it worked out, but I will say others probably had a very different experience depending on how far they were. But you always just have to go with the flow and bounce back from any potential hurdles or rough patches. And really, the thing that I would say I learned the most from the PhD is how to problem solve. You are, of course, becoming an expert in your field of study and what it is that you're doing, but really, you become an expert in how to deal with challenges and when things go not the way you expect.
But I think one I'll just mention again was the point about motivation. Don't
Yeah.
do it unless you want to do it, and just be ready for things to not go as expected. And you brought up so many good points. So now I'm going to transition over to your current position in clinical research. So clinical research is basically research that looks into ways to improve patient care and better understand that. So as a clinical research coordinator, what kind of research do you currently work on, and what do some of your responsibilities include?
I'm currently working at St. Michael's Hospital within the Department of Anesthesia and within our Pinnacle Research Group. So it's an entire team that works together on various different studies. Before I go through it and say what I'm currently working on and what those roles look like, I do want to just point out that given what I had been studying in my PhD and previously, I truly didn't think initially that I would get this job in the anesthesia department because I had no prior knowledge or experience with anesthesia itself. But obviously, from all of those skills that I had accumulated over the course of my undergrad and graduate studies, it really allowed me to be able to exceed in this kind of role as a research coordinator. So I just wanted to say it was kind of a chance, and I was really glad that I ended up doing that because it led me to here, and I've loved working here. So as part of the Pinnacle team, we really do emphasize and focus on research that is able to hopefully improve the lives of patients. So it's really focused on patient health, and there are a various range of different projects that we are working on. So these span from a little bit of everything where we have these very large scale observational studies, like these prospective multi-center site studies. We're also doing smaller scale randomized control trials, Health Canada clinical trials, again, doing a lot of collaborative work with other nearby like hospital groups or other universities. So we have our toe in a little bit of everything, which makes it exciting because the projects, while all kind of focused on how we can better patient health, all have a little bit of different means or focuses of what they're looking at. So that part is really fun to have and be part of so many different projects. As a coordinator, specifically in that kind of role, you're kind of responsible for just overseeing day-to-day activities of a project or multiple projects. And you're pretty much playing a major role in how that study is conducted. So, really, we're providing support and working with various different people. So, that includes things like principal investigators, other collaborators, including other research staff, administrators, etc. And all of that is really just to help ensure that a clinical study is able to move through successfully, and ideally, as smoothly as possible. And day to day, things are very different. So I don't know if you want me to touch on what a day in the life is like for a coordinator. But that's kind of the overview of what responsibilities are, because we do financial, administrative, patient-facing tasks, a little bit of everything.
So just a little bit of everything it takes to get a study going and completing it. The point of
Mhm.
completion, basically. And now, and just an extension of this question, what do you love most about your job? And just on the other side of that, like, what challenges do you face regularly, but something that commonly comes up that you have to overcome?
So for things that I do really love about clinical research and being a clinical research coordinator is, at least in my case, every day is very different. So I like that variety in terms of tasks and activities. For me, some days be on the phone most of the time, speaking with patients, completing follow-ups, or helping to coordinate, various aspects of a study, like study visits. Other days, I might be doing more patient facing tasks. So, where I'm actually going to speak with patients in clinic, talking to them about research opportunities. I might even be going into the operating room and handing over a study drug that's being investigated for one of our studies. Or I could be involved in monitoring patients who are coming in to receive a novel intervention to try and help whatever their underlying chronic condition is. So, for example, we're involved in a lot of studies looking at chronic pain, or even, in regards to depression. So it's very different. And then, of course, there are some days where it's a little bit more administrative. So in that case, I'm working more with helping to develop study protocols or other essential documentation. I might be completing ethics submission or helping with data entry, data checking. So what's really nice is that no 2 days feel the same. And that's the aspect that I really do like about this job, and having that ability to be involved in all of the different aspects of research. As for some challenges, I think the biggest thing is that it can be a lot at times, especially if you are on and working as part of multiple different projects. So just being able to handle that workload, being on top of timelines, and really staying proactive is super important, especially because challenges will come up. So it's very ideal and helpful to be able to really think about what are the next steps before they happen. And that really helps you to feel not only more prepared, but be more ready to handle those kinds of challenges if they come up. So, for us, because we have so many different research projects, I just find that it can be easy to potentially overlook or forget one kind of small detail. So, what is really helpful is being able to have different ways to proactively handle that. So, having to-do lists, following standard operating procedures, even just putting calendar alerts and reminders, just because you do need to be quite meticulous and pay attention to those small details when it comes to research. And you really see that the individuals that thrive in a research, position are the ones who can think a few steps ahead and are doing their checking just to ensure that everything does, go smoothly and gets done according to what needs to be done. But as I said, it's never straightforward. There's always going to be challenges that come up and hurdles to overcome. But another aspect that I find is really helpful is having a really good, supportive, collaborative team that you can work with. So that is really key. and also key to making the job enjoyable as well. So making sure that who you're working with is a positive kind of environment and having that good kind of communication amongst the team really just makes the process so much easier and smoother in the long run.
I think that was a really insightful answer because you told us a little bit about like specifically what you do with patient interactions and then more administrative tasks and a
Mm.
lot of details to pay attention to if you have many studies going on at once. And the last question I have for you is just in general, what advice would you give to students in their undergrad who want to get more involved in clinical research? Maybe if they don't have any experience, how would you suggest they explore that option a little bit more?
Yeah, I definitely think for anyone that's interested in research, I think the best way to find out if it's something that you'll like is to really just give it a try. Try and find ways to get that exposure and see if you can volunteer and see if that's something that's of interest. So, if you don't have those opportunities to take research courses or lab courses like I was able to, still going to be tons of opportunities for you if you reach out to university professors, even just like you might be available for volunteer. And again, I think in order to help also make it a more positive experience for yourself is really looking for people that are doing research that you find interesting, right? So if you're not interested in the science, but you know what I'm saying, like definitely if like your calling where you're like, this is so interesting. I would love to do this kind of research. And that is really what you should, go into. So get that exposure, see what parts of research you like, and maybe through that you'll figure out, oh, you like more of this and not so much this aspect of research. And that'll kind of be you to navigate what your next steps might look like with getting involved in clinical research. And I think the other biggest kinds of advice that ties back into what I had said earlier is you give it a try, even if you think you may not be qualified enough or you're not going to potentially select you. Don't overthink it too much. Hesitate. The most, worst that could happen is that they don't select you, but there will always be other opportunities. And this is something that you would enjoy and like potentially succeed at. Like it's definitely something to give it a try and don't get discouraged. Just applying, keep looking, and I'm sure something out there for everyone. And on that same note, too, within clinical research, there are so many different kind of roles beyond just coordinator. You could be a research associate or an analyst. You could be a manager, a monitor. You can work with different agencies, like more involved with the ethics board. You could be working with pharmaceutical companies. You might even, want to continue and have your own research lab and be a principal investigator. So there are so many different options, and if that's something that interests you, it's definitely worthwhile pursuing. So that would be kind of piece of advice. Definitely try and get involved as much as possible and find what your passion is and what you're most interested in and kind of after it that way.
Think you bring up some really good points. Like if you don't know exactly what you want, like hesitate too much. And volunteering is a really great way to do that because pressure is low. You're not working there. You're not even if it's not a research course. Volunteering is like a lot more chill. And then, as you said, you could branch out from there. Thank you so much,
Absolutely.
Gabriella, for completing this interview with us. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks so much, Nishat. Again, I also appreciate the opportunity. So thank you for letting me be part of this.